Okay. Welcome, vibrant ADHDers, to the Thriving Connections Bootcamp. This session is all about exploring one of the most vital elements of our lives, the quality of our relationships, starting with our relationship to ourselves. By the end of the session, you will have the tools to empower you to have happy, enduring connections with yourself and with others. For many of us ADHD, for many of us ADHDers, having happy, empowered relationships seems like an unattainable dream. Some of us have had years, even decades of revolving friendships, strained partnerships, stressful work relationships. Some of us have even had to go through the devastation of divorce or being fired from work. With this kind of history, it takes a huge toll on our self-esteem and our self-worth. We feel shame. We feel like there's something inherently wrong with us, and we're terrified that it's always going to be this way. My hope for you today is that you realize that the patterns that you have with your relationships, that they're not unique to you. They're common threads woven through the ADHD experience. These predictable patterns that we have, and we'll talk about the patterns in the second part of today's talk. These patterns emerge from the unique way that our ADHD brain works. Now, the good news is once we recognize these patterns and once we have the right tools, we can transform our relationship. So today's session is going to be broken down into three parts. So I'm going to have you save your questions at the end of each section. I'm going to have a Q&A time where I'm going to ask you a couple of questions and then you can ask me questions. So today's session is going to be broken down into three parts of Q&As at the end of each session. You can feel free to put your questions in the chat as well if you think you're going to forget them, because we might, and I'll address them during the designated Q&A time. So today's session is we're going to break down into three parts. The first part is developing that relationship with ourselves. The relationship with ourselves is frankly the cornerstone of all relationships. It's the foundation upon which we build all other relationships. The second part is we're going to look at understanding common relationship patterns and archetypes in ADHD. And then the third part, we're going to look at the 6 steps to rebuilding partnerships. So the relationship with your significant other, if that's strained, there's a 6 steps strategy to rebuild that. And this is taken from Melissa Orlov's book, The ADHD Effect on Marriage. These 6 steps, we'll go through some strategies for rebuilding. These 6 steps can also be applied to other relationships. So before we officially get started, I want to tell you a little bit about me. My name is Erica. I have ADHD. I was diagnosed after I had my 3rd kid. I am a psychotherapist, and I have been specializing in ADHD for the past 10 years. I am currently a certified life coach, and I have individual coaching. I work with clients individually, and I also have a small group coaching program for women. And today, I want to use myself as an example that highlights the need to develop the inner self as a prerequisite to having life-giving connections with others. So one of my adaptations to my undiagnosed ADHD was to become a chronic people pleaser and caretaker. So I would take care of people, take care of others at the expense of myself. It ended up depleting me, making me resentful, and eventually it really strained my relationships. Over time, I got burned out, and this resentment, the way it would show up in my relationships became toxic. At least they were toxic for me. And so in my late 20s, I began to see a therapist. And when I saw her, I began to strengthen that relationship with myself. For the first time, I began to know my wants, my preferences, my needs. I began to clarify what my values were, and I began to speak for them and began to seek those things in my relationships. For the next few years, it really led to a relationship crisis. And I don't say that lightly. I mean, I was in crisis. Some of my relationships were in crisis. And this was because a lot of my relationships were built on caring for other people, and they were built on me wanting to people please. So whatever the other person wanted to do, whatever their passions or priorities were, I would adopt those. And as I began to develop my preferences, those relationships started to become strained. And so the next part of my process was I had a period of mourning these relationships that faded to the background of my life. Frankly, mourning, like, this is my late 20s, early 30s, mourning, all the years that I had spent in these relationships, not being myself. And then, as I had some spaciousness and some distance from these relationships, and I was starting to develop new relationships that were more based on equality and people who had the same interests as me, this was really exciting and lovely. And it was terrifying. What if these relationships didn't work out? What if they turned out to be like all my other relationships? It was really scary, even though it felt good. There were times when I would be pulled back to these old relationships, and finally, over a couple of years, I really began to settle into these new relationships. And now I have deep, solid, fun, joyful relationships that are built in mutuality and respect. We buoy each other up rather than, one person being dragged down. And I share this today because I know from my private practice and even from my group coaching programs that this is so common. Many ADHDers stay in relationships that are toxic for us because we're too scared to move out of them. We're afraid that there's not going to be anybody else. And it is the process of moving out is hard and painful. We are not taught to grieve. We're taught to accumulate things in this culture. We're not taught the process of letting go. And so the process of letting go is a process of self-forgiveness, a process of mourning the way things were, the way things weren't in the past that we now know, it could have been different. And then the process of moving on to new things and sitting, in that limbo between the way things were and the process of creating the new. All right. So I hope that example from my life was helpful. And now I want to formally move on to what I have been saying. Before we can create a meaningful relationship with another person, the inner self needs to be developed. And I want you to just listen to this. Only to the extent that I am richly developing my wants, my desires, my passions, only to the extent that I am richly developed is my relationship with you meaningful. Only to the extent that I have generated genuine content within myself do I have anything to give you. So I used to have this therapist who would tell me, Erica, you've got to put your own oxygen mask on first. You have to take care of yourself first. Otherwise, you're not going to have anything to give anybody else. And we all know that's true. I know on days that we're exhausted or depleted, our best selves don't show up in the world. Okay, so the question then becomes, how do we build the inner self? I like to break it down into building self-awareness and building self-worth. Both of these domains are important for ADHDers. This first area, building self-awareness, I like to break that down into two portions. The first part is moving more internal, knowing what's happening within yourself in this present moment. And this is mindfulness, right? John Kabat-Zinn, the main researcher in the United States who researches mindfulness, and he's also a practitioner of mindfulness, he defines mindfulness as the awareness or the awareness that arises through paying attention. So bringing your attention consciously to the present moment without judgment and with compassion. So intentionally paying attention, and it can be internally paying attention or externally paying attention, doing it on purpose, consciously with compassion. That's mindfulness. And we're going to do a mindfulness exercise in just a few minutes so you can get a sense of what that's like. The second aspect of self-awareness that I'd like to talk about is vertical exploration. And vertical exploration, I think of like kind of a bird's eye view. And so you're getting a bird's eye view of identifying your needs. And we can identify some of our needs through this present moment means through this mindfulness-based practice that we're going to do. So identifying our needs, what we value. So autonomy, connection, fitness, health, fun, things that we value, identifying our strengths. So things that are natural, come naturally to us, that are easy to us. And ADHDers, we tend to have predictable sets of strengths, curiosity, compassion, resourcefulness. So we have different types. We have a certain set of strengths, our preferences and our passions. Preferences and passions are crucial for ADHDers to figure out because our preferences and our passions, we need those things to motivate us and to start with task initiation. If we're not passionate about something, and if we work for somebody and we're not on board with their missions and their values, and we don't respect the person, we can have such a hard time. So identifying our values and connecting to our lives, having people in our lives who live out our values and having things in our lives that we're passionate about and that we have preferences for. This, when we can create this in ourselves or within our environment, we thrive. And so that's why this vertical exploration is so crucial. So I support clients in doing a lot of vertical exploration. I do this in my individual coaching and in my small group coaching. And I want to give you one example of vertical exploration. So there's an organization called the VIA Institute of Character. And let me see, I have their website pulled up. So it's viacharacter.org is the website, viacharacter.org. And if you go to their website, you can take a free survey. You need to enter your name and your email, and you'll get put on a list. And it's a free survey, and it takes about 10 minutes to complete. And this survey is really beautiful. After you complete it, you get a list of your top character strengths. And so for ADHDers, a lot of things that come to the top are things like courage, justice, so a desire for fairness, honesty, right? We're authentic, humility, humor, spirituality. A lot of ADHDers tend to be spiritual, and there's been some interesting research with that, and zest, just like, having zest or verve for life. So for ADHDers, that's one example of a vertical exploration that I'll do with clients. And what I like about the VIA survey is that it's semi-structured, it's relatively quick, and then you get printed out information of your top character strengths, right? We need that because we're going to forget, right? We're going to forget what our top character strengths are. And, if you have a printout of your top character strengths, you're at least going to hold on to that for a while and look at it. And one thing that I'll suggest for ADHDers to do is, if you have the top character strengths, put it in a file and put that file somewhere where you go at least a few times a year. And so that, when you forget what your top character strengths are, you come across the spot and be like, oh yeah, that's right. I've got this. So that's why I like the VIA survey. And the things that I like to do with clients, I also like to do in a semi-structured format, not too structured because we'll get bored, and feel kind of hemmed in, and then to actually have it, all of the information that you've culled from this vertical exploration, have it written down so you can access it in the future. So that's vertical exploration. We will get back to building self-worth. And building self-worth, I break down into 3 components: psychoeducation, love-based meditations, and positive self-regard. And we'll get back to that after we do this mindfulness meditation. All right. So this MEBS, MEBS, is a version of mindfulness where you sequentially tune into what's happening in the present moment, in your mind, with your emotions, and in your body. So instead of me explaining it anymore, let's dive in. So I invite you to lower your gaze or close your eyes as you feel comfortable. And now bring your awareness to your breath. Noticing your inhale and your exhale, allowing yourself to become a little more relaxed with each breath. If you notice any obvious tension in your body, whenever you exhale next, just imagine releasing the tension, softening those muscles. Good. All right. Now, bring your attention to your body. Notice if it feels tired or awake. healthy or sick, heavy or light, strong or weak. And notice where you're holding physical tension. Is your whole body tense? Or maybe just your jaw or the back of your neck or shoulders? Those are common areas where we hold tension, stress, anger. And notice your breath. Notice that your breath happens whether you pay attention to it or not. See if you can sense your heartbeat. Your heartbeat's always happening, whether you pay attention to it or not, right? It's been happening, well, for heartbeat, since we've been in the womb, breathing since we've been, since we've been born. So this physical state of our body is always there. It always functions to keep us alive and to help us move through the world. And so if it feels right, give a nod of gratitude to your body as a precious instrument that helps us move through the world, helps us to act in the outer world, and as an instrument to inform us of our bodily needs. Tired, we might need sleep. Tense, we might need to relax. And so offering a nod of gratitude to our body. And then on your next exhale, release your awareness of your body. And now bring your attention to your emotions. Emotions are diversified, changing, sometimes contradictory. Notice if right now your emotions are strong or subtle. You might be experiencing happiness or sadness, hesitancy or eagerness, wonder, frustration, maybe even anger. You might have one predominant emotion or several emotions, maybe even seemingly contradictory emotions. A part of you might feel excited, another part scared. And again, if it feels right, give a nod of gratitude to whatever emotions are present and a nod of acknowledgement in their role to communicating your preferences, desires, and their role in motivating you to action and giving you information about a situation. And remember that emotions are only one facet of our being. Each emotion comes and goes. And now, on your next exhale, release your awareness of your emotions and bring your attention to the mind. Notice if your mind is noisy or quiet. You might even check in, like, what channel is your mind attuned to right now? Judgmental, fantasy, beating yourself up? What stories are going through your mind? And notice the varying content in your mind. The content always shifts. And the mind is a powerful tool of discovery, creativity, and imagination. And the thoughts, the creativity, it ebbs and it flows. And so giving a nod of gratitude to what your mind can give you, the creativity, the discovery, the thoughts that come and go, and know that it's one fluctuating facet of your being. And so with your next exhale, release your awareness of your mind. And now let your awareness begin to reflect back on itself. And observe that calm, clear quality of when your self-awareness releases the connection to the mind, the body, the emotions. Notice that calm clarity that comes with being able to stick with that self-awareness, even while the emotions, the mind, body sensations are in the background. And if it's challenging for you to to reflect back on that self-awareness, I invite you to bring your attention to that pause between the inhale and the exhale. So you inhale, and there's this little micro space, and then you exhale. Paying attention to that pause can also help you get to self-awareness. So inhale on the pause, notice that timelessness, that expansiveness, and then release. So this pure self-awareness. It's a place where we can start to get calm. It's a place where we can observe our emotions, our body, our thoughts. We can see all of it and see it with clarity without getting attached to any particular thought, emotion, or feeling. Just sitting with that self-awareness. And now release your attention to the self-awareness and begin to take a couple of deep breaths coming back to your body and keeping a thread of connection to that self-awareness, which is an executive function, the first one to develop. And now wiggle your fingers and your toes and keep a thread of connection to that calm clarity of self-awareness. Begin now to open your eyes and come back to your environment. And this is where you might lose that connection to self-awareness. So if you do, you can close your eyes again and then keep that thread of connection, then slowly open your eyes. All right, really good work. So with this self-awareness, I really like this meditation for a couple of reasons, because in the moment, when us ADHDers, if we're in the middle of a deep conversation, we might be so attentive to the other person that we don't tune into what our beliefs, what our thoughts are, what our preferences are. And so, let's say someone says, hey, let's go out to dinner to McDonald's. And then you're like, you might be wanting to do that. And if you take a moment to check in, you might be like, oh, I don't really want McDonald's right now. My preference is to go out for Indian food. And, checking in with your mind, with your body, with your emotions can help tell you what you want to do in the moment. Or let's say you're negotiating something at work and someone is saying, I think we need to do this project this way and you need to be involved. And let's say you check in with yourself and you notice anger coming up or resentment, you don't want to do this. Then you can check in with yourself, well, what's happening? I don't have enough time to do this. I have done the last 3 projects, checking in with anger. Anger gives us information. Anger gives us information that our toes might be being stepped on and we want something to look different. So that kind of in the moment checking in with your body can really be important. With your body, your mind, and emotions. And the second piece, that self-awareness piece, when we practice this type of meditation, research consistently shows that it helps to reduce anxiety and it helps with depression. And both of these things ADHDers have, problems with. And so doing this type of meditation can be really helpful. It becomes important to do this type of meditation with a practitioner who knows what they're doing, especially if you have anxiety and depression. You want to be careful with meditation. Sometimes it can make things worse, and you want to know how to practice it in a way that is moving you forward, not keeping you stuck. So practicing meditation can help with mood, can help with anxiety. And then the self-awareness piece that I like for ADHDers. So let's say we get an email. Again, let's say it's an email from a boss who's asking us to do something for work. And we just feel this knee-jerk reaction of anger. And we're in this anger and we want to shoot off this email, while we're in this elevated state. Coming back to self-awareness. Okay, my emotions are telling me I want to shoot off this email and say, hell no, I'm not doing this. And if I check in with my mind and my values and what's important to me, actually, this job is really important to me. My relationship with my boss, having a good working relationship, I don't want to act on my anger. So using this type of meditation to come up to that self-awareness and check all aspects of our being, to check in, sometimes even with aspects of our environment and, what we're doing a month from now can be really helpful. This meditation can help us to pause and see the bigger picture. So that's what we call in DBT or dialectical behavior therapy, the wise mind. And emotional regulation, having strong emotions is one part of having ADHD. So learning tools to help us when we're in an emotionally elevated state is crucial so we don't blow up relationships, whether it's a work relationship or a relationship at home. All right, so that is MEBS, and that's a present moment meditation. where we can come back to self-awareness and kind of use it, see the more global picture, and pull from the past and be more forward thinking. All right. The next piece of building the inner self that I want to tune into is building your self-worth. The psychoeducation piece is learning about ADHD. Now, why do I like this part? Learning about how your particular ADHD brain functions is crucial. One, so you stop, like having an ADHD brain in a neurotypical world. If we don't address the different ways that our brain, if we don't address the differences in our brain, we are going to repeatedly make the same mistakes. We're going to repeatedly, unfortunately, blow things up, blow up relationships, forget to go to appointments, not finish projects, not move forward in our career. And when we do that repeatedly, we erode our self-esteem and then eventually our self-worth. We come to believe, because we're having these external failures, we come to believe that there's something inherently wrong with us. The good news is that having an ADHD brain is kind of like having poor eyesight. I cannot even see what's happening right now, but these glasses are a tool, it's an accommodation that now allows me to see you. The ADHD brain is physically wired differently. We're going to get into some tools for managing the differences a bit later, but what we can do, there are accommodations that we can make that allow our brain to function in a way that's more like neurotypicals. And then over time, we get to set up our environment, just like I get to put on my glasses, this is changing my environment. We get to set up our environment. We get to offload everything onto calendars. We use reminders. We use external support. Like, how motivated are you when you have something due for someone else? It's an easier time getting ourselves motivated than just doing it on our own. We set up work groups. We join a small group coaching program. We see a therapist or a coach to help hold us accountable. Those are the equivalent of our glasses. So learning about our own ADHD, our own flavor of ADHD, and our specific executive functions that are weak, we can shore those up, and then we can make accommodations to help us be more successful in our life. And then we also, what's so important is we then tune into our strengths, right? Our strengths, and finding the sweet spots of our lives, the job, the people who have our values, who we're passionate about, who share our passions, who, at a work, making sure we're in a place where we're playing to our strengths. When we can do that, this brain explodes and thrives, and we do great. So the first thing is to learn about our unique flavor of ADHD and make accommodations so we can thrive. That's first step in building self-worth. The second step that I like to do with people is using ADHD specific meditations. And my favorite book for that is Mindfulness Meditations for ADHD. It's by Miriam Saunders. And I have specific meditations that I like to do with people from that book. And the final thing that I like in terms of building self-worth is what I call positive self-regard. Carl Rogers introduced this term. He's a psychotherapist, and he introduced this term in relation to clients. So always hold compassion, understanding, looking for the strengths in your client, helping them to act on their best selves. And I like to apply that to ourselves, having positive self-regard for yourself, acting as if you matter. And we're going to get, the next few slides are going to address some ways in which you can hold positive self-regard within the realm of communication relationships. And before we do that, I want to have you focus on this quote by Brene Brown. You are imperfect. You are wired for struggle. You are worthy of love and belonging. So Brene Brown, this is to every human. And what I want to point out is every human is imperfect. None of us are perfect. We are wired for struggle. We are wired to see the negative. All humans are wired to see the negative. And so our ADHD, with our executive functioning issues, the areas where we're weak, it doesn't mean that we're bad. It doesn't mean that we're wrong. We're all wired with some areas of not being perfect. We're not going to be the best at everything. All of us struggle. So welcome to the welcome to humanity. Welcome to the struggle. You might not see other people's struggles. We all struggle. And actually, as a therapist, and as a well into middle-aged woman, I have seen it in myself, in my friends, in my family, in my children, in my children's friends, in my clients, all of the circles that I run in, there are struggles. And we are all worthy of love and belonging, regardless, period. That is a value that I hold deeply, and it's a value that helps me to know that I am worthy of love and belonging. If you are, I am. All right. So the first way to act as if we matter using positive self-regard is by setting boundaries. So put yourself into the equation. That's what setting boundaries is taking time. I'm just going to start at the bottom. We're going to go a little bit backwards. Taking time for ourselves. So no matter what our obligations are to other people, even during the workday, if you're working, taking little breaks just to do the MEPS, where's my mind right now? Where are my emotions right now? Where's my body? Where's that self-awareness? Am I being driven by emotions right now? You can do that 30 seconds, 3 minutes. Another way to reinvest in yourself is time blocking. Always, 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 every week, have at least 2 hours for yourself to do what you want to do. And I'm not talking, it could, if you're exhausted and you need rest. I am not talking screen, okay? I'm not talking screen. I'm talking rest. I'm talking going for a walk in nature. I'm talking doing a passion project. Anything that is truly reinvesting in yourself, nourishing yourself. Block out 2 hours just for you. All right, that's the first piece. The second piece is us ADHDers, we tend to have a hard time setting boundaries for a lot of reasons. Somebody asks us something on the fly, hey, could you help with this committee? We might get a hit of dopamine thinking about, oh yeah, it'd be fun to be involved. I get to see more people. People would think that what I'm doing is really cool. I really like this project. We might have a knee-jerk reaction to say yes. And we might not be thinking through the time commitment. We might not be thinking through what the next season holds for us, which might be a busy season. We might have pretty extensive time blindness, not understanding the length of time that it would take to fill the requirements that we need to do. And we might be a people pleaser, right? We might want to be able to say yes. So it is important to practice saying no. And there are a lot of ways you can say no. So by the way, no is a complete sentence. Use other concise ways of saying no. Can't do it. I got something else going on. I've got another commitment. Oh, you really want me to help you? I have another commitment. I can't. You can't find anybody else to do this and you're really desperate? I am so sorry. I have another commitment. And by the way, that's the broken record technique. You don't have to get into more and more detail and defend yourself. Just repeat, I can't. No, no, no. I'm sorry, I can't. And, you could, if you want to, expand that. And one of my favorites is to use the word right now. So I don't have the bandwidth for that right now. And that's a nice one to say because that tells you, because you really might not have the bandwidth right now, but after the new year or in the spring, you might. And so sometimes I'm sorry, I can't do that right now can be really helpful, both for you and also it softens it a little bit for the other person. You can also acknowledge and honor the other person who's asked this request. I'm honored you asked me, or, I appreciate you thinking about me. And I'm sorry, I can't really do that right now. I would love to, but I already have other plans. Maybe next time. Or no, thank you, but that sounds lovely. So practice, you might even just go in front of a mirror and just practice saying no. And still, I know it's going to be hard to say no. You definitely want to say no to things that don't align with your values and aren't taking you in the direction where you want to go. So always pause and at least think that piece through, because otherwise, you're not going to end up where you want to go. You're going to end up, on the side of some highway having to cross busy traffic. If you're unable to think through in the moment, if you have the option to say no, we don't always have the option. If you aren't able to think through in the moment, whether you can do this at this time, or if you're feeling like you're wanting to say yes and you're noticing like all that dopamine moving through you because it sounds exciting, I really encourage you to, and you can't say no, even though you know you should, I really encourage you to practice saying, let me get back to you on that. I'll reach out to you tomorrow morning. That can be so helpful because then that gives you the time and the space to look at your calendar, to let that dopamine rush pass through, for you to go back to your values, pull out your values, pull out your sheet of strengths. Like, oh my gosh, what she's asking me to do is all filled with details. And I hate doing details, or it's all about fundraising. And I hate talking to people, go back, look how the request aligns with your values, your needs, your strengths, your passions, and then get back to the person. When you do say yes, because face it, we have to sometimes, right? When you do say yes, negotiate time limits. Okay, I can work on this until 4 o'clock. And then, I really like that's my deadline. I go home at 4. Or like I can work on this for a month, or yes, I can contribute 3 hours to this. So really set time limits, negotiate them if you have to. And again, with whatever you're doing, if you are doing a big project, build in breaks for yourself. All right. Another way to act as if using that positive self-regard is to state your preferences, right? And so using that MEVS meditation, we in the moment we tune into our preferences. Do you want to go out for a Chinese? No, I'm really in the mood for Indian tonight. Or I'm really in the mood for McDonald's tonight. Notice your preferences and then speak for them. I prefer Indian food tonight. Or actually, the other day, my youngest daughter, had a book. She needed to read a book for an English class in a specific genre. And it had to be a relatively specific genre. And I had just gotten done reading this murder, this Jane Austen novel that had been modernized and turned into a murder mystery. So it's kind of like a murder mystery novel. And I was like, oh, you should read a romance murder mystery. And she's like, oh, I'm not sure. Da, 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 da. I was like, it said to me, like, oh, this was such a great book. And she's like, Mom, I don't know what I want, but I know I don't want to do that. And so sometimes, we don't know what we want and we know what we don't want. And especially if someone's pushing you, and it's for, your decision. You can just say, no, this is what I prefer. So speaking clearly for your preferences. And the last piece is being succinct, giving your voice more impact. And the first part of that is sometimes we disqualify ourselves and we might say something like, I'm sorry, but I don't, I don't understand that. I don't want to bother you, but I just want to know this little piece of information. Sorry to bother you. Or I just want to add. Those are ways to make our voice smaller. And some of us ADHDers do this after years of experience of saying, people telling us, what you're saying doesn't make sense, or you don't know what you're doing, or you can't get things in on time, or you're telling a story and people are just like glazing over it because you're missing the point and you're getting into all of this irrelevant background. And so sometimes we learn to just qualify ourselves because we believe what we have to say isn't important. So really notice if you're saying, I'm sorry, or I just, or I don't want to bother you. So using less disqualifiers and using less overall qualifier. So for example, I just like to add that I think this might be a good idea versus I think this is a really good idea and I would like to explore this further, right? That has more impact. All right, so now is time for Q&A. My questions for you to contemplate are, how can you apply these assertive communication styles to your relationship? And how can you apply this mindfulness practice to your relationship?